Okay, so this is EdTech300. Tonight is October 25th. Um, so we're going to continue with digital identity. But first, there are a couple things I wanted to discuss. So I'm just going to share my screen with all of you. Okay. There we go. All right. Probably more than half of you have gotten your midterm feedback from me. And the rest of you, I am almost done. I'm just going to be honest here. Grading and feedback, not my strong suit. Like when I do it, it's good, but it's hard for me. It's one of the hardest things that I find about teaching. Like I just find it really, really difficult to actually like get through it, you know, and it's kind of like this horrible, daunting task. Not because it's horrible to look at people's work, but because it's like, it becomes very daunting. So, and when you are actually in the classroom, hopefully you don't feel the same way, but most teachers I know do kind of have this, like, it feels overwhelming when you're grading. And it's also really hard, especially when you're actually giving grades, to have to assign a number to somebody's work, because it feels really like just crazy and not great. And you know, it's hard because everybody's like, your effort looks different from somebody else's effort, and so there's all sorts of kind of complex feelings that I have. I wish we were all like pass-fail classes, because honestly, I feel like that's, you know, I can tell if somebody is putting in the effort in and knows what they need to know, but it's hard to give numbers to people and know that it might affect their lives in negative ways. So that being said, if you didn't get it, you will very soon. But I think, so over half of you have gotten one or have gotten your feedback so far. Is it by email? Yeah. So once I've sent out all of the ones, like once I've sent out everybody's, I should be finished tonight, but once I've sent out everybody's, I will let you know on Google+. And then if you haven't gotten anything by that point, that's when you can email me and say like, hey, not sure where my thing is. But be sure to check your junk mail first, just in case. Okay. But so just a couple of things that I noticed going through people's work. So one thing that I think we're all, or a lot of us are having some issues with, is the idea of making really like rich posts, right? So if you were writing an essay for a class, you would probably put, you'd put citations in, and you'd reference things, and you'd show that you were reading and understanding things that way, right? And blogging is different in that you're not going to make an APA list at the end, but you still need to be referencing what you're talking about, and you need to back up what you're saying. And so it's important when you're blogging that you're linking to things, like that you're basically, it's for a few reasons. So one is, it's nice for the reader to be able to explore different things. It's like they can choose which things they want to learn more about. So that's one of the reasons that linking is really helpful. But the other is, it shows that you have some like reason for what you're talking about, right? So, linking to an article that relates to what you're discussing, or like that shows that you are doing reading in this class, and that's helpful. Or, linking to another person's blog in this class to show that you have read that and that you're kind of engaging with that. That's another way of kind of making things really much richer in your posts. So it's really important that you're linking to things that help your reader understand and kind of see the support for what you're saying. Because that's the only way you've got to do it on a blog, right? Like you can't put citations in because it just looks kind of weird. You just get to link to wherever those places are. So make sure that just because it's a blog doesn't mean that you're not referencing things. You're just doing it in a different way. And it's fine if you're referencing, Wikipedia or, an article or a blog post, right? Like those are all things that are totally acceptable to link to. But that's kind of the magic of blogging, is that it's not just you, it's like all of these other things that can be brought in. So I just wanted to show you. So Morgan, sorry to embarrass you wherever you are, but Morgan does a really nice job of linking to things, right? And so you can see in her post, right, she's giving you lots of options to explore new things, right? She's talking about Kylie because that's the person she was cyber stalking. She's linking to tweets about our class, right? She tells us where she's searching, Google, Facebook, those types of things, right? And so there are lots of different things that we can explore, right? We can see her Twitter, the Twitter account, Kylie's Twitter account, or DuckDuckGo, right? So like all of these different places that we can kind of go off on little tangents if we want to. So that's really important to be doing that. You'll also notice that she's got lots of pictures in her posts, right? Again, this just helps kind of to break up the text. And it's one of, again, the nice things about blogging is that you get to put images in. Those two things are really important because they're kind of what makes a blog post and not just like this online place where you happen to be typing your thoughts, right? It makes it a much more rich piece of work. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, that's important. It shows that you're backing things up and all of that. And another one I wanted to show you, I just wanted to show you Kendall's learning project. So sorry, now I'm embarrassing Kendall. So Kendall has a really nice learning project, right? She's learning ASL, and you'll notice like she talks a lot about, you know, even her past learning. She links to previous posts. And the other thing that she does really well is she talks about all sorts of different places that she is learning from, and she gives us kind of her thoughts on those things, right? And so she's exploring lots of different online sources, and she's telling you like, these are the things I like, these are the things I don't like, right? And then also, you know, she's including videos of herself, which is pretty cool. But so there's lots of positives here in terms of just really, like she's being very thoughtful about her learning. And she's trying out a number of sources, right? So lots of positives there. And I think that's one thing that we're lacking sometimes on the whole in our learning projects. Like you all are really good at putting lots of images in and that kind of stuff, but just making sure that you are linking to these different places that you're trying to learn from, and then kind of really reflecting on the learning process. Any questions about that? Good. Okay. All right. Another thing that I know that some people had some concerns about was Twitter, right? And so, all right, so who here has a fear of Twitter? Okay, so not anymore, there we go. Shiny by 100. Yeah, right. And so can anyone, like, what is it that makes you, I guess, scared of Twitter, if I can ask that? Like, what is it about Twitter that's difficult? Formatting, can't take it back. Hey, you can delete tweets. You can actually delete tweets. You can't edit them, but you can delete them. But I suppose, you know, a screen capture lasts forever. Okay, keeping posts under the correct number of characters. Okay, so right, and I think, Shalene, I think that what you're saying is common, right? So it's a lot of people will lurk on Twitter, and that is the term, lurking, before they actually get going in terms of actually posting stuff, right? And so lurking is okay to some degree, but because our class is only 13 weeks long, you do eventually have to get past that lurking phase. Okay, so I get it, like I understand. When I joined Twitter, I was really overwhelmed at first, right? And it was like, I didn't want to share anything, and I thought everything I had to say was super stupid. And you know, I was like, what can I possibly have to like to share with all of these other people, right? And I think what's helpful about being in a class where you have to do it is that it hopefully will push you out of that sort of lurking stage, because you kind of have to get there, right? So basically, there are some ways of making it easier to get going on Twitter. So one of them is to just share resources, right? So if you're sharing articles, it's hard to feel like it's you're not likely to seem stupid or to say something silly, right? Because you're sharing an article. So it's not like that, makes it a lot less scary. So if you remember, I made you all get a Feedly account. So if you're not using it, this is why you should be using it. And this makes it really easy. Like I have the Feedly app on my phone, and it's just super easy to share articles this way. So, you know, hopefully you have Feedly with, you know, you've got some things set up that are, that you're pulling in on your Feedly. So there's good stuff for you to share. So, you know, if I go into ed tech and I want to share something, there's lots of good stuff that's already right here for me. And what's really nice about Feedly, if you're not using it, is that it makes the tweet for you. Like it composes it, right? So, you know, for instance, this is interesting. Padlet has voting and grading tools. That's kind of super exciting. So I'm going to go and look at that and like, hey, Padlet's added some new features. This seems like something that's related to our class, right? Like it's ed tech related, cool, awesome. And so, you know, I read it, and you make sure, again, you want to read things before you post them. And then I just click on that little bird, right? And the little tweeting bird, and look, it generates that tweet for me, right? And so I always put quotation marks around titles, because sometimes I like to differentiate between the title or what somebody else has said and my thoughts, because sometimes it can be kind of weird and confusing otherwise. So I always put quotation marks. And how do you get a preview of the article to show? Twitter does it sometimes. Twitter, that's a new thing on Twitter, and like to me, I actually prefer not having that. I always find it super weird. But Twitter seems to pop it up sometimes if you're actually on the Twitter site. But I wouldn't worry about that. Like I'm totally cool with the link. That's my preference. I think it's because we're used to Facebook, right? But if you do it on Twitter, I find it works better if you put the link in there. But through here, it's not going to, right? But so I've got my title, and then maybe I want to put some hashtags, right? And so the thing about hashtags is really just that you have to get used to them, right? And you'll learn them as you go along. And so, you know, you can have your basic like ed tech. That's a pretty good one, right? We can use our EDTC300 tag. I might use ECNI 831. That's a grad class that's running right now that has kind of a similar theme. So that'll help me get a few more people in. And I might even, I don't know, like I wonder if Padlet has a Twitter hashtag or a Twitter account, and maybe I want to link to that. But so what I can do if I want to tag someone in it, what I can do is just take this now and copy it, and now go over to my actual Twitter, and then I will have the functions of Twitter in there as well, right? So sometimes you just post straight from Padlet, but sometimes it's like, no, I want to do something else. And so I'm just going to go and bring it over to my desktop version, right? Which is, again, pretty simple. Just copy and paste. And now it's over here. And so like maybe I want to see if Padlet actually has their own Twitter account. It would appear not, but I'm just gonna close that out and check just in case. We'll see if Padlet has something. Oh, looks like they do, okay. So now I know that Padlet is just at Padlet, cool. They may not be the most active account, but so again, the tweet stays here, which is kind of lovely. But so maybe I just put the @ in there, and now like I've tagged Padlet in it, which is also fine, right? It would have been fine, right, from Feedly, but it's like, this is even better. So, you know, these are some good hashtags. I could put more, but whatever, like this is good. I feel like this is a good start. And then I can just hit tweet. And again, like you don't have to put a million hashtags. I read somewhere that you don't want to put more than 4 because then it just looks spammy. But I don't really subscribe to like very specific numbers of things like that. That seems kind of silly. But again, it's just like sharing resources, like that's not nearly as scary, right? Like it's just an article. You're sharing an article, not the scariest thing in the world. You can see maybe how that makes it a lot easier to do it through Feedly, you know, because you can just tweet right from here. It generates it for you. And again, like this is not, you're not having to share your deepest, darkest thoughts. You're just giving an article, right? So does that seem doable? That's less scary. Yeah, it's just an article, right? Like it's somebody else wrote it. It's not even you. It's like you're just sharing someone else's resources. And if it comes from something like Free Technology for Teachers, which has hundreds of followers, like totally cool, right? So I would suggest put Feedly on your phone if you've got a smartphone, and just make it a habit where you try to share at least one resource a day, right? Simple goal, right? Every day you go on there, you read something, you're exercising your brain, and bonus, you have shared a resource now, okay? So try to do one thing a day, not nearly as scary. And then the other thing I would suggest is that you try to respond to one person a day. So, I mean, if you are looking for something to respond to, go to our class hashtag, right? And see what's on there, right? And so, you know, we've got like Nicole is posting adorable pictures of her baby or videos of her baby, right? Or like, you know, Brooklyn's talking about her learning project and Shalene is talking about being a stalker, right? Just kidding. It sounded worse than it was. But so, you know, find one thing on there that kind of interests you and comment, right? Just like hit the reply button and say, hey, Shalene, I really liked your post. Make sure you read it first, because otherwise that seems kind of silly, right? But like read something on there, look at something, my goodness, like this is like a gimme. Nicole has put an adorable picture of her or video of her baby up there. You can comment on that, that's fine. But like it's about, the reason that you're doing this is to build connections, right? You want to network with people, and networking with people means sharing resources so that you're kind of a constant presence, right? So that we're reminded of you. It's like, oh, that's, you know, there's Liz again. Like I recognize her because she tweets every day, right? And so I'm starting to see her as a person who I might want to follow, right? And if somebody goes to your homepage and they see like that you're actually tweeting, they're more likely to want to follow you too, right? Because you're a good addition to their network. And connecting with people is just like, that's a good thing to do because, you know, if you put more into your network, people are going to be more likely to then connect with you. So easy goal, I think, 2 things per day, share a resource, try to reply to someone. You can also do other things, that's like bonus, but does that seem doable? And neither of those things is terribly scary, right? Like sharing a resource, not scary, we've determined. And responding to somebody, I mean, you can go beyond this class if you want, but if you're just talking to people in this class, that should be kind of a pretty safe thing. But even like going onto the SaskEdChat hashtag and, you know, respond to someone on there, it's not super scary. Like a next step then would be if you're trying to, you know, if you really want a good grade in this class, then I would say, like you're aiming for 85, 90, then start doing some Twitter chats too, right? Like you want to, again, be building your network. But, you know, I think as a start, as you're getting comfortable on here, resource and 1 comment a day is a really good place to start. Okay. Cool. So then just a comment about Google Plus. I just want to, again, like I tried to make this clear at the beginning, but apparently not clear enough. So I'm just going to repeat it. Google Plus is not the most important space to me. Google Plus is a space that you use when you need to. If you have a question that is like relevant to the class, if you want to share something with the class, but don't actually feel like sharing it with lots of people, or you just want people's thoughts on something. If there's a blog post and you're like, I would really love some comments on this. These are things that you can share to Google Plus. And if you go on there and you find that somebody has a question that you can answer, awesome, great. But it's not, it doesn't need to be your main focus. It's like, use it, sure, and try to be helpful if other people are posting things, but I'm much more interested in you focusing on Twitter and on your blog. Okay? And then the last thing is like, remember that you should be commenting on people's blogs. So again, that's something you can try to do like once a day. That could be like, you could have the person who you reply to on Twitter could also be the person whose blog post you read and comment on. Like you're just killing two birds with one stone, right? Just little things to make it all more manageable. Any questions? Good? Okay, cool. All right. So in that case, I am going to move over to my presentation and we're going to think a little bit more about digital identity. All right, let me just new share. So I'm gonna check this and I'm gonna play this. Oh, that was exciting. Okay, so digital citizenship, digital identity. This is like take two on here. Okay, so we talked a little bit about digital identity last week, right? And started to think about the things that make it difficult and really complicated. So just as kind of a reminder of that, the things we talked about last time, we talked about like the importance of having your online presence be like a resume for you. Also the idea that on and offline spaces are like, they're the same now, right? They're collapsed. And so that makes it really important to be, to have a good digital identity. As well, you know, we talked about how it's difficult to control your identity online because other people might be posting something to it. And we talked about how your online identity becomes kind of like your permanent record. And I was talking to, or I was observing a grade 6 classroom this week. I have an intern in a grade 6 classroom and she was doing like a mini lesson on digital identity. And those kids were actually fairly, like, they were pretty well versed in this, right? And she was asking, you know, why is it important to not do bad things online? And the kids was like, oh, well, you know, the police could use it as evidence later. So like these messages are getting across. But I think that kids have, like, they understand that there is some importance to this. So it's important that we're able to talk to them about it and give them like tips for being good and safe online. So a couple other things that I think are really important about digital identity. So one is the issue of public shaming. So has anyone heard the term cyber vigilantism? It's a good one. No, we got nothing. Nobody. Does anyone remember Cecil the lion? Yeah, Cecil the lion. Yeah. So in case you are not familiar with Cecil the lion, but it seems like most of us are, that was, you know, we had this case of this this guy who was hunting in kind of a shady way, and basically had lured this famous lion out and then you know, killed it. And not a great guy, right? But he really got shamed in a nasty kind of way. And so we refer to that sometimes as cyber vigilantism, right? It's like the public taking matters into their own hands in order to like take care of crimes, or, you know, moral failings online. And in the case of, the lion guy, like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had some very bad judgment, not my kind of person, definitely was a bad choice, right? But you might argue that the extent of the online harassment and the way that it went into his offline life was a little extreme, right? So he had, like, his house was vandalized, and basically, like, he had a job as a dentist, and then kind of like he had to shut everything down because people were just like constantly harassing him, right? um, and like, yes, again, not saying that we should be killing lions, but I also, and especially not lions with names, like that was just poor form. Um, but I do think that we need to be cautious around public shaming because, yeah, as Luke says, like, it becomes a mob mentality, right? And we want to make sure we're not bringing out our digital pitchforks for things that maybe don't aren't necessarily going to apply there, right? So, and also I think keeping in mind that people mess up and people mess up online, and being like, um, being somewhat cognizant of that and understanding that people do make mistakes. And that doesn't mean that they can't become they can't get through that and become a better person. So I think we just need to be really thoughtful about that when we see this sort of public shaming, right? Um, so and I guarantee you the hunter guy definitely did not go after any named lions, or probably other lions after that, right? Like, I'm pretty sure he learned his lesson and is not going to be doing a lot of hunting at this point. But it really does become a mob mentality, and so you just need to watch that. But I think it also has pretty big implications for us and for your future students. So this poor choice, like, but here is an example again of some really like rapid public shaming. So these two young girls decided to post this tweet. The cotton picking, they were cotton picking, and then chose that nice word to use. So like really inappropriate, right? Really super inappropriate. But notice the time on this, right? So this is 6:18 p.m. And she did get fired, okay? But what happened was that by like 11 p.m. she'd lost her job because this happened. People found her online, and then they found where her job was, like that she worked at this isogenics place, and then they found the contact information, and then they basically went after her, right? So again, 6:18 p.m., same day we get this tweet from the company. 11:23, she's been fired, right? So again, this was a kind of mob mentality, like, and there are entire websites dedicated to this, right? There's a website, a Tumblr called Racists Getting Fired, and basically their whole object in life is to find people who are doing racist things and then get them fired by contacting their job. So it's, obviously poor taste, right? Like super poor taste on this girl's part, right? Like this is like not a good choice, right? Not a good choice whatsoever. Should not have done this. But it becomes really serious very quickly, and it becomes this kind of really ugly mob thing. Again, like it's quick and it happens. It's just, yeah, it's not good. I don't know. It's difficult to say because, like, obviously I don't want to say, yeah, it's totally cool if you make racist tweets. Like, I don't think so at all. But at the same time, I think we need to, again, understand, I don't think this is a very old person. Like, she's super young and definitely made a mistake. And, I would say you get one mistake. If she continues to post racist stuff, then we know it's a pattern. But we try to, like, we need to, I think, understand that sometimes people make dumb choices. There's this girl as well. This is, again, poor judgment, super poor judgment. And this girl was like 15, right? And basically she tweeted this out, and then a month later, somebody found it, and just like the internet came down on her, right? And basically it was like, you shouldn't be smiling in Auschwitz. And there is like a pretty big kind of online outcry about that as well, right? That it's not good to take selfies in really inappropriate places. And like, yeah, not a place to be taking a smiling selfie. Fair enough. And the little, like, this little happy face with the smiling cheeks, not a nice touch, definitely. But again, this, like, people went out of their way to shame her and harass her. And she did come out later and say, like, the reason she did this was that her dad basically had, like, she and her dad had studied Auschwitz, and they planned to go together, and then her dad had passed away, and so she finally got to go to Auschwitz and was really happy to finally be there, living out this thing with her dad. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But again, like, this is a 15-year-old, right? And certainly the caption is not helping. The smile is not helping. If there was something around, like, her dad and that whole thing, might have been a little bit more helpful. And I think that the context is really important, right? And that before we make judgments about people, we do want to find out what the context is. But so again, a situation where this is a young person, and this is going to have a pretty negative effect on her life, probably for a while, right? So, again, it's really important that we talk to our students about, like, I guess about, the how quickly a mistake can come back to totally screw you over. Now, I will also say, in reference to this young lady, that, the context at first, I was like, oh, well, that was the context I feel should have been more taken into account and all of that. But if you, like, I went back to her Twitter site later, and she was still making jokes about Jews. And so in that case, to me, the context now says, no, actually, you're super racist and did not learn your lesson, right? But I think it's important that we try to find that context, right? And try to find out what's going on with these people before we rush to, like, crazy online mob justice. And also, like, there are communities that are kind of, like, springing up online around doing dumb things. So this is from the Selfies in Inappropriate Places site. So this is, she's taking a picture with a coffin in the background. Not the best choice. Even like this, like, there's a whole group of people who try to find, selfies at funerals, selfies in inappropriate places. So this is also, like, you have to keep in mind that there's that context too, right? That kids are maybe seeing this, and they're looking at these sites, and they're getting the idea that this is funny and this is hilarious, and yay, let's take pictures with our dead grandmother in the background. Like, and yeah, but so I think the problem, Luke, is that satire is sometimes difficult to get across online, right? And so it's unclear. And that's what makes these things so complex. And again, that's why it's hard to, like, it's a problem when we rush to judgment. I don't have an answer to, whether we should be going after these people as mobs or not. Like, it's not that, like, it's, every situation is different, but I do think we need to look at the context, and we need to kind of pause and wait and make sure that we're not just having a gut reaction and trying to ruin somebody's life, because this is life ruining in a lot of cases. And I mean, this one here, like, this is somebody tweeting out a picture that his friend took. So again, we get back to that. It's hard to control your online identity. Like, we don't know what that guy did with his selfie. He may have just sent it to his friend, and now he gets this put up on Twitter, right? So again, like, it's so many layers of complexity, but I think it's important that we show kids examples like this, and we talk about them and we say, like, what's going on here? Is this super inappropriate? Why is it inappropriate? And how could we maybe have done better, right? So again, like, there's this whole like public shaming thing, which is a complex issue for sure, but one that kids need to be aware of. And then again, permanence, right? And we talked about this a little bit, but I think this is like important to underscore. So again, remember Snapchat, and remember that Snapchat saves everything that you do on there. So it's actually not the magical website that everyone thinks it is. If you are aware of the history of Snapchat, the creators did at some point come out and say, yes, it was intended as a sexting app. So it's not like a magical, happy, fun place that, that people sometimes are led to believe. But there are also much more serious, like, and dark implications of this permanence, right? So one would be breakups, right? And we know that breaking up with someone, right, in like the Facebook era is different, because all of a sudden you have to like change your Facebook status, and you have to, deal with Facebook giving you reminders of that person and having to go through and delete all of the sites or all of the pictures that have the two of you in them. And so this permanence can have a big effect on kind of your mental health. And like, we know there have been studies that basically Facebook can tell when you've gone through a breakup, not just based on when you've changed your status, but actually like based on, the types of comments that you're getting, the types of comments that you're making, how often you're online on Facebook. And they have actually, like, they've done studies, and there are particular patterns, right? So these online spaces are having kind of lasting effects on stuff like that, on the way we experience traumatic events. And so, for instance, this is a really good article, but about how basically this girl's best friend passed away, and Facebook just continues to remind her of it, right? And then Facebook is really bad about this, and they apparently, according to the article, she'd get a notification like, hey, you haven't talked to this person in a long time, you should send them a message. And so again, Facebook's weird and bad algorithms are, they have this negative effect because things just don't go away. So actually, Facebook, they're like the Facebook memories, right, has this on this day thing. And Facebook now allows you to like turn that off, or to not be reminded of particular people or dates. And they had to do this because basically when they first put this out, it was like a big disaster, right? So for instance, this was an article, or sorry, this is a post made by somebody where basically they got the on this day notification, and it happened to be the day that their best friend took his own life, right? And so we don't necessarily want this like exciting see your memory from this day reminder of something like dark like that, right? And Facebook has had like just a slew of issues around this, and like they call it, so it's been termed inadvertent algorithmic cruelty, right? Like basically the way that the algorithm doesn't actually, like it doesn't account for real life events and real life changes and personal, personal tragedies, right? So this is another instance of the year in review video, where the front of this person's year in review video was a picture of his dead daughter, right? So again, really like not what you're trying to have there, right? Like it's meant to be this positive, happy thing. And then because the algorithm is totally divorced from humans, it just pops up what's there, regardless of whether it's really hurtful or not. And so we've seen like issues around digital accounts and who gets access to them. And basically people are trying to like there are often family members who are trying to get control of their deceased family members' events. So, or sorry, digital digital accounts, right? And right now the law is really unclear on this, but there actually was just a case, I think, in the US where a mother was able to get access to her dead son's accounts when she actually went to court for it. But I think this is going to become an issue in coming years. Like, it's going to become a growing issue because I don't know, I read somewhere that like it's either already happened or it's soon that there will be more dead people on Facebook than there are live people, which is a really kind of dark and horrifying thought. But so you're going to have all of these accounts that are, you know, maybe memorialized, but also, you know, if nobody has access to them, then they're just going to stay there looking like they're still active accounts. And that I think that's going to bring in all sorts of pretty serious problems, right? And serious kind of, it's going to change the way we do stuff. So would it be an issue of power of attorney? The problem is that it's these passwords, right? And so you might have the authorization to do something like on the site if you were logged in, but that doesn't mean that you would have access to the password. And the only people who can give you access to the password would be the company, right? And so companies are really often hesitant to do that because of privacy issues, right? So there are actually systems that, like there are things you can do where basically you can set up a you can set up a person who will have access to everything after, like if you do die, and basically if you have not been active on particular sites like Google or whatever, like your Gmail account is a huge thing, right? Because there's all sorts of important information in there, right? And so you can set something up where if you don't log into your Gmail for 3 months, then this person who you've named gets an email and it's like, you know, this person's dead, and so you get access to it or whatever. And first they send an email to the person who had the account in the first place just to make sure. So like if you just happen to not be using your Gmail, then, you know, you would be able to respond and say like, no, actually still alive. But it like kind of sets up a way for somebody to get access to your accounts after a while. But it's not going to be instant, right? So it's kind of like, it's really murky, and like everything online, it's like the laws take a long time to catch up to kind of the reality of things. There's also super creepy. There's actually a company that basically you can sign up, and then if you die, basically they analyze all of your tweets and they kind of develop a pattern for how you tweet. And then if you die, basically the Twitter bot thing, which has like learned what you're like online, actually comes in and keeps tweeting for you as if you're still alive, which is super duper creepy. But it is a service that you can sign up for. Yeah, it is super weird, and and it's odd, and I don't know why you would want that, like why you would want to continue to tweet after you died. Like, I feel like as a family member of somebody like that, that would be really disturbing. Yeah, you'd probably freak people out because they'd be like, oh my God, what's happening? Why is this person still tweeting? And again, I don't know why. Humans are fascinating individuals. I don't know if anyone wants to take a stab at why they might enjoy that. If there's anyone who's like, I'm going to go sign up for that service right now. But I'm feeling like we don't have any takers. Even like, Jenny, you really have to be a messed up person, a really messed up person to be like, you know what I want to do? I want to mess with people after I die. Emily doesn't see it. Emily's going to sign up for it for us. But Emily, we don't want to find out what it's all about for a very long time, because that would mean that you were dead. So, yeah, you can sign up, and then just like, we'll have a notification in 70 years or something. Okay, so Jesse is saying, yeah, a possible reason would be that he wants, but really, you want people to enjoy your tweets after you're dead? Like, I don't know. just feel like that's not going to be your concern in the afterlife. Like, I wonder about my tweets. Are people still enjoying my tweets? Do I still have a big following? Like, anyway, I don't know. Super weird. I think it would actually be really interesting to see what the bot found out about you, right? And I think it is possible to like go and like you can activate the dead you just to see what kind of stuff that they would tweet, and that part actually I think is amazing. Could be really fascinating and a bit of a social experience, or experiment. But I don't know. I just feel like it's super creepy. See, there we go, Jesse. I feel like you have to tweet quite a bit though, right? Like you really have to. I don't know. Like it would have to get to know you pretty well, right? Yes, a long-term project. Okay, so if Jesse drops off the face of the earth, we'll know it's because he's trying to play some horrible joke on us with this crazy dead tweet bot. Good. We've all been forewarned about the long con project. Awesome. But yeah, so like I feel like there's a lot of super weird stuff related to digital identity and just to like the crazy complexities of it. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And again, I think it's important to remember just how badly the law is, like how bad the law is at actually keeping up with this stuff. Yeah, I mean, Shalene, I feel like if you wanted to mess with your own algorithm, then then the algorithm would be like, yeah, this person likes to mess with people by making random tweets, and then it would be accurate, see? Because it would continue to make random tweets. So sketchy. Anyway, we can all think about that one. Super creepy. So on that note, I do want to think quickly about why we care about this as a teacher. And I'm sure, we've seen some things recently. Anyone think of any, can anyone think of any incidents where teacher digital identity kind of comes into play here? Anyone seen anything happen recently? Mm-hmm. People have been fired over beer. Absolutely. What else? Okay. 2 BC teachers took nude photos on a trip climbing a mountain. Fun. That's fun. And they sent them into a magazine. Cool. Weird. When was it? And there have been some really weird incidents. So for instance, there was a woman who 50 years earlier had been some sort of pinup model or something, and basically there were nude pictures of her out there, from magazines. And 50 years later, one of her students found this, and it blew up, and people were like, oh, she can't be a teacher because look at this horrible moral failing where she has these risque photos. So even 50 years later, it's kind of crazy. But so there's lots of weird examples of this, and there's also examples of people posting posting things that teachers have done in schools, and then that gets them fired, right? And there's been incidents in other professions as well, right? For instance, there was a case in Saskatchewan of the nurse, right, who commented and said, I'm a nurse and I'm really not pleased with my dad's care, the care my dad's been getting in this particular hospital or whatever, and ended up really getting badly sanctioned, right? Because they were you're not representing the profession well, right? And so that is a concern for teachers too, right? You have an obligation to not to do dishonor to the teaching profession, right? That's part of the STF Code of Ethics. And that includes online stuff. And so people, you should be cautious of not doing bad things online, even if just because like it can come back to get you, right? And so I think it's really important, and the reason we do this with the e-portfolios, that you tell your own story, because like there are just a pile of poor choices that have been made. So this is, for instance, a picture or an article about a high school teacher who tweeted nude photos of herself and called her students jailbait and talked about getting high. Yay, like poor choices again, really poor choices. And so, you know, this person ended up losing her job, unsurprisingly, right? It's like, I feel like that's
fair. The latest teacher to do something overtly sexual and get suspended from her job is 23-year-old Carly McKinney. McKinney is a math teacher at Oberlin High School in Aurora, Colorado, where she was placed on paid administrative leave on Tuesday. McKinney did admit to being co-creator of the Twitter account Carly Crunkbear, an account where she tweeted things like, "Just got called Miss Cutie, points for being clever, however, you are still jailbait, naked, wet, stoned, such an easy day, can't wait to roll up after school." She even got retweeted by Diplo for posting a picture of herself twerking on what appears to be a bedroom wall. There were also posts about having pot on school grounds that she claims were posted by her friend. The school district says that all employees are trained about using social media and about what is or isn't responsible behavior. Things like don't post anything online they wouldn't post on a classroom chalkboard. There is an ongoing investigation into McKinney's conduct, but as far as social media goes, she, like all other teachers, are protected by the First Amendment. Investigation is also trying to figure out whether or not McKinney actually did have pot in her car on school grounds. Until then, the paid administrative leave is simply just a routine measure.
Okay, so that's, you know, your quick blurb on Carly McKinney. And again, if you missed that, her Twitter site was, her Twitter handle was Carly Crunkbear. This was a particularly interesting case because her teachers decided to, or sorry, her students decided to create a free Crunkbear campaign and made t-shirts because they liked her. And I mean, I guess if she, you know, she's really trying to be the cool teacher here, I suppose, but yeah, not good choices. She did end up being fired because, you know, there were some like questionable and also really illegal things, you know, like having the pot on school grounds. And then also, you know, like the twerking photos, just, you know, a pile of bad choices happening there. And I feel like probably teaching is not the job for her. So that's an extreme case, right? Then we have like, you know, slightly less extreme. So this is a teacher who lost her job because she wrote on Facebook that her students were germ bags. Again, poor choices. Parents are snobby and arrogant. And I think this is this is a good lesson in the fact that your comments on Facebook, no matter how private you think they are, probably not private, right? And because of the whole, you know, friends of friends can see things, Facebook posts are often very visible. And Facebook makes it hard to keep things to keep things private, right? The default on Facebook is always making things public. And so you actually have to work hard to keep things from the public view. So again, a lesson that, you know, perhaps we don't make these comments on Facebook. No, I would say, sure, don't make them at all, right? Probably not great that you think your students are germ bags, maybe says something about you as an educator, but you know, if you're going to be complaining about your students, you don't want to do it on Facebook. Like, it's just not bright. So, and again, not sanctioning calling students germ bags at all. But basically, I mean, I think that, you know, all teachers do complain at times about things about their students. Like, I think that's, you know, that's a thing that happens, but we need to not do it in public, right? Because it's okay to vent. It's not okay to write insulting things about your students online. Yes, she should have, there you go. She should have cried into her wine like most people, yes. Speaking of wine, so this is a teacher from Georgia who, hang on, it's just, there we go, teacher of Georgia, who got, who's on vacation. She was on vacation in Europe, and she has a picture of herself double fisting. I think it's called something else in Saskatchewan, but basically, you know, having a drink in both hands. And yeah, this one is pretty common, right? And this one I think really depends on where you are. So basically, this one happened to be seen by a parent. She thought that it was private, but a parent saw it, and the parent went and complained, right? And so you're in a very conservative district in Georgia, perhaps. But it is interesting, right? Like, you're on vacation, and I mean, imagine you're in a restaurant and you're drinking a glass of wine. Like, is that wrong too? Like, if a parent comes in and sees you drinking a glass of wine in a restaurant, like, is that an issue? It becomes a really interesting sort of kind of moral judgment type thing, right? And I get it if you're working at a school that doesn't allow drinking at all, maybe, or it's a religious school that has some sort of prohibition on that. But like, having a drink in each hand is not exactly like the end of the world, right? And she doesn't even look particularly drunk. Like, I can see that you don't want pictures of yourself looking super drunk on Facebook. Definitely not a good choice. But anyway, so this one is this one's is kind of extreme, but I think it just tells you that it's really important to be mindful of your context, but also to really be, I guess, aware of. Sorry, cat's making a weird noise. To be really aware of, like, the fact that you're a teacher everywhere, right? So it's made worse by the internet, but really, like, you are a teacher at all times of the day, and you're kind of held to a very high standard. So just again, like, being mindful of what's out there online. And I would highly recommend, if you have a Facebook account, like, don't just try to hide the things that are maybe not so flattering. I would just get rid of them, right? Like, do you really need that picture of you being super drunk? No, you don't, okay? It doesn't need to be on Facebook. And if there's a chance that a picture would look bad for you, if somebody saw it, it probably doesn't need to be on your Facebook, right? And so I think that that's something important to keep in mind. Like, don't count on privacy filters. Just try to keep it clean, also, I think this is the importance of, having some good conversations with your friends about what to and not to post. This is a tweet from a student who I happened to have been teaching at the time. So I've blurred her out, but I followed her on Twitter. She knew, I think, that I was following her on Twitter. Again, she was a student in the ed faculty, and so she posted this. Not great. Probably not, again, something that you want to be putting online. But what's worse here is that she tagged her friend in it, right? And her friend is also a teacher, right? And so that's where it becomes really important to have those conversations, like, hey, trying not to look like a giant drunk online. So even if it's a joke, maybe don't post these things. Because this is, again, not what you want to see from teachers. And if I had a kid in that person's class, I would not be thrilled, right? At all, right? And even just like joking about being an alcoholic, not really funny for people who actually have addictions, right? So, so again, like, having that conversation and being like, hey guys, don't post things about drinking because that's not really necessary. Like, it's not important. Wait, why is who not at school? Oh yeah, it's 8:45 p.m. Yeah, they're at wine night. Why does it bother me? Oh, it bothers me, I think, for two reasons. One, that it's kind of promoting some alcoholism. And I think that that's kind of problematic. Again, if you have an open, like, professional-ish account where that people, like your parents or students' parents, might be following you, that's really problematic. Or your profs are following you. Again, poor choice. And so I think it promotes, like, excessive drinking. And also, I feel it's really not cool of this person to tag her friend in it as well, right? Like, that's seems problematic. So this is not something that's going to get this student kicked out of the program. It's probably not something that would get somebody to ruin, like to lose their job, right? It probably here wouldn't ruin your career. But I do think it's in bad taste, right? It's just not maybe the best choice for somebody who's a role model for kids. Does that make sense, Tara? And again, like, yeah, you could make a closed secondary account, sure, but you could also, you know, Emily, as Emily suggests, you could have a private text feed where you talk about your drunkenness, or here's a thought, you could just not feel the need to brag about your drunk antics, right? Like, if you're having your drunk antics and the only reason you're being drunk is because you want to show off to your friends, you should maybe reconsider your life choices. Like, I think you do have to realize, like, you are going into a teaching profession and maybe these aren't the posts you make anymore, right? Like, this isn't, I mean, unfortunately, you're not just any other person. You are somebody who's going into a profession with very high standards. So I do think it's one of those things where it's like, why not just, you know, not post this? Like, was it that necessary? And as Webster points out, right, like even having a private text feed, I feel like you would have to know that these people were not going to share it. But of course, anything can be screen capped, right? But so it's fine as long as you really have excellent trust in that person. And so I think it's important that wear a mask or a helmet all the time. Just, yeah, go around with like a superhero mask, just whatever you're doing. It's like, I don't know who that is, but Spider-Man was getting really drunk in the corner. Or stay inside and never leave the house. But I don't like, okay, that's not necessary. But there are definitely people there. I've heard of teachers who have like camera-free parties, right? And they all put their phones away. And then nobody takes pictures because, again, why do you need to take pictures of your drunkenness? You know, like, you're not 15. It's not that exciting anymore. Moving on from there, this doesn't need to be a moral lecture. I'm just saying, like, you don't need to share about it. Like, again, you're not 15. Yeah, it's like, I mean, and Kendall, I would say, like, it depends on your personal beliefs about the action. Like, I have had glasses of wine, you know, like it's not that I think that you shouldn't be able to drink wine. There are probably some communities where you wouldn't want to even be doing a lot of drinking, depending on, you know, religious beliefs and things like that. But it's definitely the posting that makes it really problematic. And, you know, even like as an instructor, I certainly would not go to the Owl to get drunk. You know, like, that would be a poor choice. In fact, I don't think, like, if I really felt the need to get drunk, I wouldn't want to do it out at a bar. Luckily, I don't feel the need to get drunk usually, or pretty much ever anymore. But you know, like, I feel like as an educator, you have to accept that, like, maybe there are some things that you're not going to do anymore. You know, and as Luke says, like, it should be something you're proud of, like going out and having a good time at a bar, fine. But you know, like, getting super wasted, probably not the thing you're doing as an educator, probably not the best choice, right? And yeah, you're right. See, my cat, although I'm trying to teach my cats to speak English, and that could be a problem. All right. So again, like, just, I think it's important really to model a positive digital presence, right? Like, I think that's kind of the key here, right? That as educators, we want to be modeling something good. And so, like, we know, I think this is a helpful quote, right? We know that students are not going to be any better at creating a digital identity than anyone else is. And so it's really important that as educators, we are, you know, teaching our students and modeling for our students what it looks like to have a good digital identity, right? And I like this particular metaphor for this. This idea that if you're teaching kids about social media, you need to actually be on social media, right? It's like the idea that if you want to, if you were teaching someone to drive, and you never took them in a car and you just told them all the bad things that one didn't want to do while driving, and you had people teaching who didn't know how to drive, like that would be really unhelpful, right? And we probably would be kind of all agreed on the fact that that's not how you teach people how to drive. But we do that with social media, right? Like we teach it from a position where we don't know what's going on really, and we just tell people what not to do, and we never actually let them into those digital spaces. So I think it's really important that especially that we have experience in these spaces if we're trying to teach about it, if that's fair. To me, that seems fair, right? Like it's part of your job to have some knowledge of these spaces so that you know how to model that for your students. So on a similar note, so that's digital identity, right? Like digital identity is super complicated and like lots of tough questions that we could be asking about it. And then if we go a little bit broader, there's digital citizenship, right? So what does that mean to you? Like, what do you think of if I say the term digital citizenship? That's part of it. What else? I know that somebody else has some thoughts on the idea of digital citizenship. Where you are online, how you engage with the world, being an active member of global web communities, connection and involvement in the internet. Yeah, right. So these are all important parts of that, right? So digital citizenship has to do with, citizenship online, right? And as Holly's saying, right, like you are a member of an online community. Just because, or just like you are as a citizen of Canada, you have particular rights and responsibilities, exactly as Emily's saying, right? Like, you have rights as a citizen of Canada. You get to vote. You get to, you get to live here. You get to work here. You get particular protections in terms of the law. But you also have responsibilities, right? And one of those responsibilities is like following the law and actually going out and voting. That's part of being a citizen, right? Participating in kind of life on like in your country and trying to do positive things. And so it's the same thing online, right? The idea that, as a citizen online, you need to be, you have rights, but you also need to be holding up your end of the responsibilities. So when we used to teach about this was like cyber safety, right? So how many of you learned cyber safety when you were in school? So if you were probably a certain generation heard the term cyber safety. So cyber safety goes something like this. It's fun posters like, this terrifying image, which is real. Last semester, I had a student who actually had this in her high school. I don't know if anyone recognizes the poster from this class. But this is what cyber safety was all about, right? So what's the message here? Don't trust anyone. Not everyone is who they say they are. Yeah, what else? You don't always know who you're talking to. Easy to be catfished. Yeah, he's super creepy. Truth can be hidden, right? And this was the big thing about the internet. When we first got online, one of these issues, there's this cartoon and it's like a dog who's on the computer, and it's one of the most famous New Yorker cartoons. And basically it's like, sorry, cracking up at Josh's comment. Um, okay. Okay, moving on. Nice comment. But basically, like, this cartoon was this dog who's behind the computer screen, and it was like, you can be anyone. Like, on the internet, nobody knows who you are, basically, right? And so even if you're a dog, you can go on the internet and pretend to be a person, which is, you know, theoretically, like, not actually true, right? Because as a dog, you'd have a hard time typing and forming language, but we take it as like, as you can be anything, right? And this was the fear about the internet at first, was just like that anyone could be on there, and like, you have no idea who it is, and, you know, no matter what else is going on, like, you could be chatting with a terrifying looking pedophile, right? That's kind of the message there. And I think it is important, first of all, to note that pedophiles, you know, children who have who are subject to, you know, that kind of behavior, right? Like being targets of pedophiles, and so kids who are the targets are generally targets of people that they already know, right? We know that kids who are sexually assaulted and or kidnapped, it's generally, like, almost all of the time, is people who they know in their real lives. That the incidence of like cyber kidnapping and like cyber luring and that kind of thing is extremely low. Not that it doesn't ever happen, but it's like, it's been way overblown, because it's an easy thing to scare people about, right? Like, it's harder to be like, hey, watch out, because your uncle might be super creepy. You know, that's like, it's a harder, like, public service announcement to sell, right? Because then people are like, my uncle's not creepy. But, you know, it's easy to be like, well, on the internet, anyone could be a crazy, scary pedophile. And so, so this, like, fear message, and basically, I mean, even what Shalene is saying, like, that like, websites are super creepy when they're designed to do this, like a take a lollipop website. That sounds sketchy. But basically, that was the whole like MO there, right? It was like, let's scare kids offline, because then we don't have to worry about any of this. Anyone want to venture a guess as to why that maybe is not a great approach to be taking? Kids are rebellious. Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. Like, good luck. I mean, how many people have told a kid not to do something and the kid's like, well, I'm especially going to go do this. So that's a big part of it, right? Change is inevitable. Yep. Yeah, and right, like, it doesn't help us understand what's going on, right? Like, just saying don't go on there is really not helpful, because it's not like, it doesn't teach them anything about the online space or how to be safe on there if they are online. It basically is just like, well, unless you stay offline, we're not going to help you. And so, you know, that's actually a huge issue, right? Like, you should be, as Julie says, telling kids what they should be doing, not what they shouldn't be doing, because they are going to end up online. Like, to tell a kid today that they can't be online is probably not going to go well for you, right? Like, that's a huge part of their life. And so to cut that out is not reasonable, and it's not an acceptable thing to do if somebody's having issues online. So instead, we need to be teaching kids what they should be doing online. And so, you know, when we think about digital citizenship, it's like, it's got to be more than cyber safety, right? So it's more about how we teach students to live in a society that is full of technology, right? Like, how do we use technology appropriately, and how do we use it not just to learn, but also as like a life thing, right? Because that's going to be a huge part of our lives. So this is Mike Ribble, whose quote this is. And there's a link to his work in the weekly plans. But basically, Ribble is like one of the big names in the idea of digital citizenship. So this is his idea, right? That there are these 9 elements of digital citizenship. And so he breaks it down into this, and he kind of goes through everything and what each of those means on his site. it's worth taking a look at, right? And it's, he does a nice job kind of breaking it down. I do still think actually that Mike Ribble focuses a little too much on the negative. Like for my taste, there's still, I feel like he leaves out some of the good things. But this is a much broader understanding than cyber safety, and it actually helps. It helps give kids kind of like tools for being safe and being responsible. So why do we talk about this? Well, first of all, because you're going to be teachers in Saskatchewan. And Saskatchewan actually has lots of stuff related to digital citizenship, and it is part of the curriculum. And so, for instance, in a couple years ago, the Saskatchewan basically, there was a report on bullying and cyberbullying. And basically, one of the recommendations was that kids needed to learn more about how to be safe online. And so they started these anti-bullying youth forums, and they ran 3 of them. And the third one was held online. And I helped to organize it. It was pretty massive. And there were actually more than 9,000 kids who were registered for this thing. It was like a massive thing. And basically, it was trying to help kids to make good choices online. So there's that, right? There's this like history of this, this youth forum that was kind of trying to build some capacity in that area. And also in Saskatchewan, there's this thing, there's this policy planning guide. And fun fact, I'm one of the people who wrote that. So I do have some, personal attachment to this particular document, but it's also the Government of Saskatchewan document, and it's pretty useful. And basically this, this document is like the guide for how we talk about digital citizenship in Saskatchewan. So that's like those are some resources, and it's also like this is why we have to talk about this, because this is part of what we're doing in Saskatchewan. This is a part of what you're expected to teach. So that's kind of from the like mandate sort of side of things. But the other thing is that I think it's important just because of how intertwined our on and offline worlds are. And so one of the articles that that you are going to look at for this week, and it's a quick one, but it's this piece by Jason Oler, and he basically talks about like the fact that kids they have one life that's like joined between on and offline. And when we have them come into school and we're like, now put your technology away, it's basically we're saying to them like half of your life is totally irrelevant. And so we really need to be teaching kids like they have this one life, right? That's mixed between on and offline spaces. And it's really problematic if we pretend that there are these 2 separate lives that we can just leave out of the classroom. So I really think like digital citizenship is one of the most important things we need to be teaching. And I think it affects like pretty much every different subject area in some way. So it is really, really critical. And so, I mean, there's like, I think misconceptions that just because kids grew up online means that they're like super amazing in terms of technology, right? And we have to remember that that's not necessarily the case. Like just because they're good at taking Snapchats and sending them to their friends does not necessarily mean that they're like super proficient and safe users of technology. And so I like this kind of idea here. This is a math teacher I think he's now in New York. He used to be out in British Columbia. Sorry, and it's just going to the next. There we go. Next slide. But basically, he says, like internet filters are good and important, but he wants them to be in his students' heads, right? Like that internet filters in school don't really do much good. We need to teach kids to be able to, to filter things out on their own. So I think that like he puts it nicely in terms of where we need to be focusing our attention. So lots of issues here, right? Like there are tons of different kind of concerns. Well, I'm just looking at what Shalene's saying. Huh? Yeah, right. And there are a lot of kids who are like really anti-internet and anti-tech. And I think it's just this, like, it's really a fallacy to say that just because you're young, you know everything about technology. Like you may have, I mean, you do have probably some skills like that maybe older people don't have in terms of just kind of fluency with like using a mouse and using a keyboard, but and you know, being able to navigate apps, but that doesn't mean that we're like necessarily super savvy users. So we're not going to get through all of these by any stretch of the imagination, but there are a lot of things that I think are really important with respect to digital citizenship, right? And so one of those things is that there's like 1.5 million apps, right? And they change really, really, really quickly, and it's super hard to kind of keep up to date, right? So I'm going to assume that most of you know what these apps are, right? Like probably, I mean, how many of you have all 4 of these accounts? Sadly. Why so sadly, Webster? It's all right. So how many of you would say that Snapchat is your primary form of media, social media? Yeah, Emily, that's because, you know, that's an age thing. I snap occasionally because, you know, sometimes there are hilarious builders on there, but I do find the whole thing to be a bit bizarre. But I definitely feel like younger people, that's like their thing, right? They're totally like, Snapchatting is like this like key part of their lives, and they've got streaks and all of this, like, and it becomes, see, there we go. It's all about the streaks, right? And so Snapchat has become a big thing. And I think as educators, we have a responsibility to figure out how to use these things, right? So whether you like these sites or not, I do feel like for me as with someone who teaches about this, like I try all of these out. You know, I get all the newest apps and I play with them and I figure out what's going on with them, because I think that that's an important part of my job, right? Whether that doesn't mean you have to be an active Snapchatter, but it does mean that you should have some idea of what's going on. And streaks has to do with, you know, the number of days that you and your buddy have exchanged Snapchats. Yeah, so it is brilliant, right? Like it's a brilliant way to keep people engaged, because it's like you have to send a snap because otherwise it's going to break your streak, right? It's really smart. So, oh, Luke, that's so cheat. That's super cheating. But anyway, so like these are kind of mainstream, but I would say, I'd argue like it's important for you to try them out, even if you delete them afterwards. And then, you know, we've also got, and so like, yeah, Snapchat I think is important. Like it's a really important one to get to know. I would suggest that you try it out this week if you don't already have it. It's really hard to figure out how to use it first if you're like old. I don't know. I had such a hard time figuring out like how to actually send something on Snapchat, because it's a terrible user interface, I think. But anyway, try it out this week. But there's also all sorts of messaging tools, right? So there's like, you know, how many of these can we identify? Thank you, Jesse. I'm glad that you agree. So WhatsApp is one of those. Yep. There's this one. We got FaceTime down here. Facebook Messenger in the middle. Facebook Messenger is like, Facebook is really sketchy. And it tries to take over your phone, and it really is kind of scary, but yeah, Facebook Messenger is, I don't know, it is useful and people use it a lot. Kik is like the, that's definitely a younger crowd, but it is, again, a messaging app. And this down here is just your general, like texting, right? So these are kind of some of the bigger ones, but again, like they switch a lot. And so like it's hard to keep up to date, but again, these are things you should be aware of. And I think what's really important as an educator is understanding that pretty much every messaging tool has a direct messaging feature. And that's where things can get dangerous because you don't know what's on there, right? SMS is like what we used to call, like, it's text. It's just text messages. That's like, yeah, it's texting, right? It's just we don't call it that anymore, although in Europe they do. And then there's anonymous apps, and these ones are super creepy. And so a lot of them have gone, right? There was what's the one that died? Yik Yak. There was Yik Yak, which was like a big disaster because all sorts of terrible bullying happened on it. So that one's dead. And there was one called Secret, also dead. Whisper, though, still alive. Like that one has been used in like movements in the Middle East, actually. Like it's interesting. Some of the anonymous apps. Ask FM is super problematic because it has had, like, there have been lots of kids who've gotten badly bullied on there. And yeah, like there have been all sorts of terrible things on Yik Yak. And Saraha is the newest one. And basically, you go on there and then you can leave anonymous notes for your friends. And it's kind of really weird. Like I've tried it out. But as you can see, like, there can be really nasty messages on there. And I think, Kyle, yes, kids can delete them, but the problem, I guess, is that, asking a kid to delete the app isn't going to fix the problem, right? Like if they're getting bullied on one app, it's not like it's going to stop happening just because they're off of that app. So, it's hard, I think, to use that as the reason for it. I think it's important to have conversations about these apps with kids and talk about like what are the potential issues, and kind of be on top of that. But I do think telling them to just delete things can be not really very productive. Saraha, like again, like all of these can be positive or negative, right? You could say nice things to people on here. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on, right? Like, how do we say nice things to people online instead of nasty things? There's also this one here. This is TBH. I don't think, last time I checked, it's not on Android yet. But if you have an iPhone, you can check this one out. I don't. But TBH is like a weird app where you can answer polls about your friends. So basically, like you can have polls and then people get to vote on things. And if you want, people can reveal that it was them who sent it, right? So it's like, I don't know, it's like the next Ask FM and all of that. And these things are generally for friends. Like you have to know these people to get to their polls. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes people have friends who are not very nice to them. And it's TBH, and it's to be honest, right? So it's supposed to be like, oh, it's anonymous, so you can be honest about the things that you think about your friends, which apparently doesn't work well with children. Because they're kind of nasty sometimes, as are adults. And yeah, I feel like there is a danger there that people are anonymous, and so they feel like they can say really mean things. And there was actually a scary phenomenon around Ask FM where kids would post mean things about themselves in order to get their other friends, like their friends, to say nice things back. So kids were actually self-bullying, and then in the hope that would persuade someone to be like, oh no, you're not ugly, right? Or whatever, which is also really kind of dark and problematic. But like there are just a lot of issues with a lot of these sites. And then finally, and then we'll be done for the night, but finally you've got your live streaming apps. So here you got Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and that little guy up here is Periscope. And these ones, again, like can be good, but also can be really problematic, right? So yeah, and Instagram now has live. like everything has live now. And so it's interesting to see how like when one app does something, everybody else just like jumps on the bandwagon. Like Periscope was one of the first live streaming ones, and then everyone else needed to get on there. And I think live streaming is another one of those things where, again, it can be positive, but it can also be really risky. And it's always nice to be able to edit in case something bad happens. Again, one to be like that you want to be talking about students with or about your kids with because of the potential issues. So because of the time, we're going to stop now, and we'll get back to digital citizenship next time because there's still a whole lot more to say. But for this week, there are a couple of articles for you to read, and then there's also 2 TED Talks that have to do with kind of cyber vigilantism. They're really interesting. One of them is from Monica Lewinsky, and like she's a great speaker and does a really good job on this. And then I want you to just think about some of these complexities, right, around digital identity and digital citizenship, and what your role as a teacher will be. And I think from the comments today, like there's a lot of things that we can say about this. Like you have lots of thoughts around it. So I'm looking forward to seeing like, what kinds of things you end up discussing in your posts. So I am going to find my Zoom again. I hate it when the Zoom window disappears. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording.